collect their belongings. As I said, it piqued my interest. From the fairly vague description I was given by my colleague, I was able to roughly pinpoint the area where the guy's camp had been. If he'd been pitched at a marked campsite, it would have been much easier to find and a much more public affair. But since he was wild camping, or rambling as some folks say, he'd basically pitched his tent in the middle of nowhere with very little to go on in terms of location aside from near such and such field. While out searching, I got my colleague on the phone again, who still had the terrified camper with them down at our Morn Country Park office, and basically asked her to rinse the guy for information. According to him, after coming across the horrifying scene, he'd basically run all the way from his campsite to Morn Country Park. He hadn't run all the way, and had slowed his pace when he felt that he put himself at a safe distance. And because it was so early in the morning, he'd had to walk past a few other homes and businesses before he saw anything that could help him. I asked why he hadn't just called someone from his campsite, but the camper repeated that he'd been terrified and hadn't bothered to grab anything before fleeing the area. At this point, as I'm driving around on speakerphone, I start wondering just how many dead sheep it takes to scare someone who was apparently well into middle age. There wasn't some there, and that I should take a gun of some kind with me if I'm the one investigating. I only overheard that last part. My colleague didn't entertain the idea by repeating it to me. I don't know what it's like for park rangers over in America, but 99% of national park staff remain completely unarmed at all times and have absolutely no access to firearms of any kind. We just don't really need it. We don't have any kind of crazy wildlife that necessitates that kind of kit. So, camper. I had a number of questions for him, things I wanted to hear with my own ears and not via my colleague over the phone. When I arrived, the guy was still quite shaken up, sitting in the little porta-cabin in the car park that serves as the National Trust office for Morn Country House. My colleague, Jane, had already given him about 3 or 4 cups of tea and was only happy to make me 1 or 2 before I got to asking my questions. They were irrelevant, really. I was confident it was still very much a possibility that the 4 sheep had managed to break out of a pen somewhere, went on the run, and then got attacked by a dog or a pair of foxes. Stranger things than that have happened round Moor, I can assure you, but few things as strange as what I was dealing with that day. We quickly found the farm which all 4 missing sheep had come from, so I drove over to have a word with the farmer and to have a check on his fences. And this is where the story starts to get really weird. We were already that weird with the dead sheep right next to the camp, but this next part catapulted the situation way past a head-scratcher and into territory which was downright unsettling to me. The farmer in question told me that 4 sheep had indeed gone missing from his farm, only they'd done so for over the past 2 weeks, one going missing every couple of nights. What's more, the farmer was only too happy for me to inspect his fences for him because he'd been up the wall with them for weeks and he couldn't work out where the sheep were getting out. I could hardly claim to be an expert on the matter, but I gave his fences a check anyways, and just like he said, he turned the place into a buttress of wood stakes and chicken wire. The farmer himself then told me that he was convinced someone was stealing a sheep somehow. A sheep going missing was an irritatingly common occurrence, but then 4 sheep going missing over the course of 2 weeks, then all turning up dead and slashed up in the exact same place. Something was obviously going on, but sadly, it was something we never got to the bottom of. The scene was cleared up, with a wildlife expert stopping by to tell us that the wounds to the sheep were in too bad of a condition to properly analyze. We'd never know if it was an animal or a person that had done those horrible things, just one of the many things that continues to bother me all these years later. When the farmer heard exactly how his sheep had died, he pressed for us to